Hello and welcome to the Pre-Chiro podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass, and today we're making a professional chiropractor connection with Dr. Jeff Langmaid out in Tampa, Florida. Dr. Jeff, can you get us started by just introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about where you were at in life when you decided you wanted to become a chiropractor?
I'm happy to do so. So, as you said, my name is Jeff Langmaid. I am here in Tampa, Florida. I grew up in the Northeast in Rhode Island, and I practiced in just about every way you can as a chiropractor. I was an associate out of school. I owned my own small cash-based boutique practice, and then probably one of the few chiropractors over 10 years ago, which sounds like a long time, that practiced in a orthopedic group in a multidisciplinary clinic. I practiced in two separate multidisciplinary clinics, working hand in hand with a variety of other healthcare professionals, all the good and bad that comes with that. And now today, I'm primarily focused on the evidence-based chiropractor, which is my personal brand, the smart chiropractor, Chiro Matchmakers, and AOMZ Spinal Diagnostics. Those are the companies I'm involved with and work in day to day. And when I became a chiropractor, the story is a little interesting and a little unique, I think, where when I was a young child, I always wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, specifically in fifth grade. This is the most geeky thing ever. But in fifth grade, I did a presentation on endoscopic knee surgery. And as time went on, I realized staring down an 8 millimeter barrel all day probably was not exactly in line with my thoughts and beliefs and interests. But I still had a passion for healthcare. Fast forward a little bit, I am in college, and my dad actually suffers a normal back injury, so to speak, goes to see a chiropractor, has a fantastic result. Next time I'm up at Christmas break, he says, "You got to meet this guy." He happened to be the alumni president for Palmer College of Chiropractic and put me on the phone immediately. "Have you ever thought of a career in chiropractic?" I said, "No, I haven't." And that's what started it. The more I learned about chiropractic, the more it became clear it aligned with what I already believed to be true in healthcare, but didn't have a name for. Fast forward a little bit farther, come to find out my great grandfather, I didn't know this at the time because when I was young, he was still alive, but he lived in Arizona. But my great grandfather was a chiropractor and had graduated from Palmer in the 20s when BJ was still teaching. I have a whole bunch of artifacts and memorabilia from that time. So there's a legacy there that took a little time to uncover. But that's a long answer to a short question
Not
about
really.
where
It's
I was
very
and what I was
important
up
to
to.
tease out the details of this story because obviously, as you introduced yourself, you described how immersed and engaged you still are in the profession years after having gotten out of school and having been in practice, multiple practices, and starting companies, and you're passionate and you're helping the profession at large and you're helping chiropractors in a big way. However, if we look back, you really didn't have a lot of awareness about chiropractic. You almost might have missed the opportunity to even hear about it, and maybe you never even became a chiropractor because it just wasn't on your radar. Can you talk about that time of life when you first realized, hey, I think I'm going to go in this direction? What resources did you tap into, if any, before you went to chiropractic school? And I'm just curious if you could look back at that time when you entered chiropractic school, like what was your level of experience with chiropractic, knowing what you know now? What was your awareness of what chiropractic was, having this experience that you have now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in many ways, I would say it was pretty minimal. So I knew at the time because of my dad's experience that, oh, my dad had a low back issue. And like I said, I was interested in health and healthcare. But, as somebody at that time who was, late high school, early college, certainly my depth of, spinal anatomy and things wasn't like very great, right? So it was pretty rudimentary in terms of I knew chiropractors existed. I certainly knew that it was a profession, but if you probably would have asked me at that time, I haven't thought about this in a long time. I didn't know what they necessarily did day in and day out, right? So when my father was getting a great result due to a back injury, that didn't seem weird to me. It seemed, to my mind, I was like, oh, that's what chiropractors do. And I knew that they adjusted the spine. So I knew that there was a hands-on component. But outside of that, my knowledge was probably pretty limited. I did not grow up getting adjusted, every week or every month. I think it was right around that time was probably the first time I got adjusted, probably in Dr. Warren's practice when he was, saying, "Have you ever thought about being a chiropractor? Why don't you hop on the table and see what we're about?" Is probably how that started to come together. And then that doc, Dr. Warren, he also, I remember he practiced in this bungalow house, and there was a basement. It's the Northeast, so there's basements. Now in Tampa, Florida, here there's hardly any basements, but down there he had a bunch of artifacts from his chiropractic history. He'd been in practice maybe 15 years at that point in time. This is 15 years ago, and or actually, gosh, probably more than that's probably 25 years ago. And he had Master's Circle tapes and a whole bunch of Patrick Gentempo on purpose, like tapes, like VHS tapes and cassette tapes. And I started just getting exposure to what I guess, ultimately, the philosophy around chiropractic, but also the understanding of this is a movement-based healthcare profession that's focused on optimal human performance. And you can't have optimal human performance if you're in abject pain, right? So getting rid of pain is a portion of this. For many people, it's how they're first exposed to chiropractic. And in some ways, how I was first exposed through my father. However, it quickly became, when I talk about that alignment with what I already thought about health, I certainly wasn't, fitness minded or in the gym every day at that point in time. But I played youth sports growing up, soccer, baseball, basketball. And as I became a teenager, I was super into, still am today, pretty much anything to do with action sports. So surfing, snowboarding, skateboarding, what I was into then, what I'm still into today. And so movement and activity and physical activity, I was into the messaging around, I guess, human performance physically was certainly something that was super interesting to me. I'm like, wow, you can help people live better, higher quality of lives. That's super interesting. And the portion on personal development, which my wife is a physical therapist, and we speak about this at length, many other professions just don't have that. It's just not a thing. You kind of go to work. I'm sure there's exceptions to this, but if you're a physical therapist or an accountant, you kind of show up, you do a good job, you go home. But chiropractic has this unique aspect that's been there almost since the beginning, and certainly was developed throughout the 70s and 80s, and still is being developed today, where there's a personal development component. Some of that, I believe, is because us as chiropractors, 75% or more of us are small business owners ourselves. So there's always an entrepreneurial streak. And 15 years ago, that was about 99%. Now there are a little bit more diversification of positions. You could work in a VA hospital, you could work in an orthopedic group. There's a little bit more diversity. But up until 5 to 10 years ago, you were probably going to own your own business 100% chance, not 75% chance. And entrepreneurship and personal development play a huge role in that. And that was definitely something that was attractive to me as I started to discover more about chiropractic. I was like, man, this is not only a healthcare profession that's interested in performance, as I've said, and you can go to sports with that. You could go to weekend warriors. You could go to, people suffering from back, neck, disc injuries. But also there's an interesting component that is about me and what I can bring to the table and my mindset and how that can impact the lives of the people that I communicate and take care of. And ironically, or maybe not ironically, I see today, I'm heavily vested. I'm not a researcher, but I interpret a lot of the research specifically through the evidence-based chiropractor. You see a lot of that going towards what I'll call the medical profession at this point in time, in the understanding of, at the base level, the brain-body connection, the understanding of how important a person's desire to be better matters in the outcome of whether they will be better or not. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, chiropractors have been at the forefront of that for decades upon decades, and everybody else is just starting to wake up to it today.
Mm-hmm. And it's an exciting time that people are waking up to it today. It's really interesting to hear you talk about the on purpose and the master circle origin story, because obviously what you're creating these days, little tidbits, little bites of information, is what they were doing decades ago. And you're kind of carrying that torch. And there's a number of other people, but you're obviously coming from that experience of having grown up with that, and growing up as a chiropractor with that, and now you're actually creating aspects of that. So when you're, well, there's multiple things I would love for you to touch on. One is when you were growing, like developing into a professional, what types of skills did you really hone in and focus on, as far as like that has led to you obviously like teaching chiropractors about how to be better online, teaching chiropractors about the science and evidence as it comes out in the journals. Like, did this start when you were in chiropractic school? And if you could just reflect on your chiropractic student experience, like, what were you really passionate about? What were the things you gravitated towards? And maybe connect that to what you're up to today.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. If I probably was not the model student, so I will trace it back. But I won't say who the professor was because I won't want to put him on right now if he doesn't want the story to be told. But a couple of years back, I saw one of my professors. We were both teaching at Parker in Vegas, and we're up in a suite or whatever else it might be. And I said hi, and he had no idea that I had built the brand, etc. And he was, to say like face palming. He's like, what? There's no idea. No, he would have had no idea based upon his experience with me as a student that I would be somebody out, publicly facing and teaching in the profession today. But I'm happy to trace the story back and kind of go through it for everybody listening and watching. And it began where I went to Palmer College of Chiropractic in Florida, but it didn't exist when I was first going to go to chiropractic school. So I actually went out to Iowa, to the Fountainhead, to Palmer College in Davenport, Iowa, and I needed to make up one class before I got started, an organic chemistry class. Probably a few people out there that have to do the same thing. And I went to Scott Community College that has an agreement with Palmer, and it accelerated. So you could do like a semester in like 5 weeks or something like that, right? So I went out there, and during that 5 weeks, you're in class like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., just one class. It's absolutely crazy. But during that time, they announced that they were going to open Palmer, Florida. And I had went to University of Tampa as an undergraduate student, even though I grew up in Rhode Island. So I was interested in coming back to Florida, potentially. I didn't have too much of a compass at that point in time or North Star in my life, but it just was like, yeah, Florida. I'd rather go back to Florida than stay in Iowa for me. So I ended up staying in Iowa about 8 months, not starting at Palmer Davenport. I finished the class, passed, did not start, but just kind of lived there for about almost a year, and then drove directly back to Florida for when Palmer, Florida was opening. So at that time, the school was definitely a little bit different than it is today. So Guy Reekman was the chancellor or the head of Palmer, Florida, and all of Palmer. But Palmer, Florida was really set to be sort of a new way of learning chiropractic. So the way that the buildings were arranged, the curriculum was really supposed to be dramatically different. Now, that's how it comes in theory, but often as the case, then you're up against regulators and educators and everything else, and you gotta kind of fit within the box of what they expect from an educational institution, which there's trade-offs for that, right? Good and bad. But I ended up going to Palmer, Florida. Dr. Reekman, who ended up going on to Life University, left, I think, when I was in my first trimester, so pretty early on. There was a little bit of upheaval at the school at that point in time. Some turnover of staff went up to Life with them. Some students, as a matter of fact, went with them up to Life. But I overall had a great experience at Palmer, Florida. The school was super new at the time, so now it's way more built out. I've been back and been fortunate to speak a few times, but we were like in one building at the time. They were using like a church as one of the buildings, like rented on the side. Like, it was definitely, duct tape and, toothpicks there to get the education up and running. But by the time I graduated, you could see that they had enough positive momentum that they were certainly going to continue on. And today, I think it's a fantastic school. So as my kind of career went within chiropractic school, I would honestly say it was pretty nondescript. So I was not necessarily somebody who was super passionate about technique. I was not somebody who was at every single club meeting. I was not somebody that was, studying in the library each and every day. I was, quite frankly, going surfing every morning before I went to class. I tried to get in the water after I got out of class. And I lived with my roommate throughout all of chiropractic school was a chiropractor named Justin Ohm. And Justin is now the head of the ICPA, the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association. At the time, his mother was the head, Jeannie Ohm. So Justin comes from his father and mother are chiropractors. So he grew up in the chiropractic lifestyle. This is interesting that you asked. I haven't thought about this in years, but we always, and Justin's one of my closest, remains to be one of my closest friends. He married my wife and I years and years later as the officiant, but fantastic guy, fantastic chiropractor, and grew up in a big family, 6 kids, both parents are chiropractors, home practice. So he grew up what I would refer to as in the chiropractic lifestyle. He never knew anything different. That's what his parents did, and that's sort of how they lived their life. And we would have a lot of conversations, and he would always say, man, I have such respect for everybody that comes to this profession without that experience, because man, that, being a chiropractor is not the most mainstream thing on planet Earth, right? There's 50,000, in my opinion, 50,000 actively practicing chiropractors, 100,000-ish licensed docs, about 50,000 in real practice day in and day out. And you look at, primary care physicians are 250,000, physical therapists 250,000, dentists hundreds of thousands. So we're a pretty small and niche profession to get involved in. But I think it speaks to those that typically get involved in chiropractic are pretty into it. We're passionate about life. We're passionate about health. And that transmits to the way that we approach every day as we go through our life. So tracing it back to school, live with Justin, great guy, fantastic experience, opened my eyes to a lot of what chiropractic could be, and probably opened my eyes in a way that I hadn't really thought of, to that chiropractic lifestyle. When a child is born and sees people getting adjusted from the time before they can remember, and is getting adjusted as needed before they can remember, is just a wildly different way to come upon life. And I think that it was pretty clear throughout speaking with him that whatever the impact was, I don't know, but clearly there's an impact that makes in the family dynamic and family life. And in my opinion, a very positive one. Difficult and a little esoteric to describe, but I think a lot of us, when we go to seminars now, when we have our own children, etc., we see other families that have, chiropractors, mothers, fathers, and the children. And it's just an interesting thing, because the children tend to get along very well. There's that weird commonality. I don't know if it's the same amongst all professions, but it certainly is that way with chiropractic. And as I went through school, I would say that I was an average student without a specific passion, other than the fact that I knew I wanted to practice, and other than the fact that I was pretty clear when I got out of school that I wanted to have my own practice. And I was pretty clear when I got out of school that I was very interested in a cash-based practice. So those were probably the most formed ideals that I had at that point in time from an adjusting perspective. I was a big fan of, not to get too technical into it for those that are earlier on in their careers, but I definitely was not a supreme technique head. So I was more diversified, still am diversified adjusting, a little bit of flexion, distraction, those types of things. So it was really more about, for me, opening up a cash-based practice, being able to just take care of people with my hands and communicate the message of how they could live healthier lives was probably my number one passion.
So to keep it really detailed on this question, I kind of want to just continue the trajectory, and you kind of reflect on how you kind of grew as a professional into who you've become today. However, I really want to key in on one of the skill sets that you have that I find to be something that I would love pre-Chiro students to start practicing, and maybe you can help teach a little basic lesson here, and then we can create some prompts from that, which is, when you identify a topic that you're going to be either creating a video for or creating a piece of content for, what's the creative process of taking that topic and then deconstructing it into like information networks? How do you do the research to connect the dots? Do you go and do like a lit review? Do you go online and do the hashtag review of like, let me find as much information that's out there and identify the gaps in the information, and then figure out what I believe about this, or what I've experienced, or what stories I could tell about this, and then put those together in a way that is concise but also connecting multiple resources together. I just think that is such a valuable skill to practice, and that if we could get more chiropractic students or pre-chiropractic students practicing this skill, that it would actually allow us to create a network of information, which is much more organic, but also much more powerful because we're starting from within the profession and we're trying to really cultivate these students to recognize that they have a potential right now today to make an impact. They don't have to wait until they've already been in practice and had success and now want to give back. They could already give back to somebody who's maybe in high school or middle school or elementary school. Can you kind of just reflect on what I just shared there?
I'd be happy to. It's a great question. A couple things come to mind. I'm going to tackle the workflow because I do think that's super, super important. So one is I'll start at the base level. It's never too early to start building your audience. If and when you get to that point where you are looking for your first associateship, you're out of school, you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, or you're opening your own practice for that matter. Imagine if you have 10,000, 15,000, 500, 50,000 people following you in your health tribe or audience online. You're going to have power at the bargaining table if you're going to be an associate, and you're going to have basically some amount of patience waiting for you when you're ready to open your front doors. So being able to get out there and build an audience is one of the absolutely critical aspects of building a practice. So it's never too early to do that. You want to stay within what's proper and, not misrepresent and all this kind of stuff, but you can get out there. Grant Elliott, a friend of mine, Rehab Fix, he had over 150,000 Instagram followers before he got his license. I can tell you that opened up a world of opportunity for him. He could basically do whatever he wanted at that point in time, which very few people have that, but everybody has the opportunity to do it. But you got to put in the work. So from a workflow perspective, let's take that one step farther. I believe it's very important to take what I call the content and put it in the proper context. The content being, what do we know? AKA the research, the literature, what's out there. That's the content. Super hard to read. Nobody reads it. I'm talking about consumers, your future patients. They have no clue and they don't want to have a clue, and it's super complicated. So they're never going to get it. So that just sits there all day long. And it's our job, in my opinion, many of the best chiropractors, not all, but take some version of that content and put it into the proper context, which means how can the consumer understand it? Example I use all the time, which is the easiest one, is that you might read in a paper about cervical radiculopathy caused by a disc herniation. That's a disc pressing on a nerve causing arm pain. The consumer way to talk about disc herniations with cervical radiculopathy is not saying cervical herniations. It's saying, is your arm pain coming from your neck? That's how you take content and put it into the proper context that gets people's attention. And I always think about things in terms of the ADA formula: attention, interest, desire, action. So how do you create attention? How do you draw in interest? How do you curate desire? And how do you then inform actions? Old-fashioned copywriting, but it holds true whether you're making a TikTok video or writing a book. It's absolutely critical to the process. Now, in terms of workflow, I'll pull the curtain back and tell you my workflow exactly as it stands. So I go to PubMed. PubMed is like this big conglomerate of every single peer-reviewed research study out there. PubMed allows you to have a free account. And with that free account, you can do like Google search terms. So you could type in whatever you want: chiropractor, chiropractic, spinal manipulation, adjustment, and anytime that and then you save those search terms. And anytime a study is published that has one of those search terms in it, PubMed will email you and let you know, hey, ding, 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 there's an article published with this search term. Now, many of the articles on PubMed, they don't give you the full article for free. So you get the abstract and you got to find a way to get it or pay for it or whatever it might be. But once you obtain that article, PubMed does that for free. They're going to alert you every time that's done. So they're going to shoot you an email, basically. That's a great way to stay up to date. From there, it's basically the hard work, which is, understanding how to look through a research paper. And some of that, I definitely didn't learn that in school in any meaningful way or anything like that. I probably was I jokingly say, it's like, when I talk to docs about PubMed, I'm like, I know you probably tried to forget this. Yeah, it's like, most people don't have it's not their idea of a good time, but there is such a plethora of information there. One of the things that I always touch on is the fact of, chiropractors, my great grandfather, even, 80 years ago, 100 years ago, those 20 years ago didn't have the opportunity and privilege of all the research supporting who we are and what we do that we do today. So that's where I think it's our job to get out there and translate that into what people can understand. And the more clearly you can do that, we say confusion kills conversion. So the more we minimize the confusion about who we are and what we do, conversion ultimately is new patients. The more successful your practice can become. And that communication is critical. So PubMed search, email you every time something's hit. From there, you can check out the article and read it. And it's just going to take, it's like a skill. So I don't have like a magic thing right now. I mean, obviously you can look at the abstract, which is sort of the summary, and then look at the conclusion and generally get the gist of what happened. So that's a good place to start. If you haven't looked at a lot of research papers, you can kind of get the gist of it. And then you can start delving into the middle, which tends to be a little more technical. But the gist of it is the abstract is the summary. The conclusion is what they found. And then you just read it. And what I do is I have specific workflow. I hold these as PDFs. I use everything on Mac. So I open up the PDF. I use the highlighter feature where I read through a study and I just, I highlight the lines that I think are important there. And from there, that's a pretty useful piece for me at that point in time. Now I know what the study is. I know the gist of what they were trying to get across. I know sort of my headlines, right? What are those one-liners or findings that are super important? And then I basically, at this point, it's a little hard for me to trace back because I've been doing it for quite a long time. So at this point, I can look at that and I inherently know what I want to talk about. I know what the point is. I know what I want to get across. Probably took some experience and a little bit of trial and error to get there. But that's where I would lean back to. If you're looking at that and you're like, man, how am I going to translate that? I would say the best place to start is think about attention, interest, desire, action. Attention. What's the headline? Is cervical radiculopathy paper, talking about arm pain because of a neck issue. Great. My attention grabbing headline. Is your arm pain coming from your neck? Anybody that has arm pain is going to pay attention to that. So we have interest or attention, right? You got somebody's attention. Interest, because if so, you might not know these three facts. Now you're stimulating interest, right? And now you can go into desire. New research showcases that chiropractic outperforms this. It does this. It does this. Benefits, aka you're dragging into desire, right? Wow, I'm interested in finding relief naturally without medication, something that works. And then action, right? That would be your call to action. If you're shooting this for your practice, or even if you're doing it online, your call to action is your invitation. So if you're in practice, it might be something like, if you're struggling with this issue, be sure to give us a call today. If you are a student looking to build your social following, you could say, if you're looking for more great health information, I'm shooting these videos each and every day. Be sure to follow, comment down below, and that sort of thing. So that would be your action. So attention, interest, desire, action is always a great way to frame content creation.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I think that if we're really trying to strengthen the profession from within, we need to look at these pre-chiro clubs that are going to start to sprout up as a result of the work that we're doing here, and we need to guide them to be effective and efficient in their action, because they are starting a pre-chiro club in a campus that has no awareness or presence of chiropractic, not in the health center, not in the teaching staff and faculty, and definitely not in the guidance counseling offices. So they need to really recognize, like, how do we create materials ourselves? How do we tap in? And those types of lessons that you just created there are going to go a long way of trying to really guide a club to work together on a piece that can represent what they're up to, what they're doing, not only to the guidance counselor, the teacher, but also maybe to the fellow students. Just because I think that, like that chiropractor said, hey, come on up here, maybe you want to check this out and come in this direction. I think that it's even more powerful if it was your friend who was like, hey, just come with me. I'm about to go to this office. This is really interesting. You're not going to believe what you experience here. Like, you're perfectly positioned to go in this direction. You just don't know it, right? And this project kind of came about because I was that kinesiology major, personal trainer, college athlete, studying nutrition, studying massage on the side because I knew my bachelor's degree wasn't going to give me a job. And I never even thought about chiropractic. It's kind of wild. And basically, I did this project at the end of college that made it clear to me that I never even thought about this profession, and it's actually perfect for kinesiology students. It's perfect. Like, it just goes well with what my passion and interests are. And so anyway, if my ability to connect your message to this audience is successful, I think we're going to have a lot of people say that exact same thing. So anyway, let's transition now to the work that you're up to. You said you're involved in 4 different companies. Can you unpack what those companies are, what they offer, what they do? Because I'm trying to build an ecosystem here for the chiropractic profession to become aware of what's available, what's out there, so that people can efficiently explore the resources that have been created, the people that are creating them, and how they can get plugged in if they wish.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to. So it's been a meandering road, to say the least, to where I've gotten today. But I'm super happy and proud of the work that we're doing, and the teams that we're able to assist in building and creating. And I love that aspect, of business, whether it's content creation, product creation. It's just something I jam on, and I think it ties back to the early interest in entrepreneurship. So there's a couple of primary companies that I've been involved in and still am involved in today. One is AOMZ Diagnostics. We do functional spinal imaging. So we analyze the spine in motion. Myself and one of my partners in one of the orthopedic groups, we saw that they had this vertebral motion analysis unit, which analyzed the spine in motion throughout flexion extension. And we were using it pre-surgically. And we said, man, there is so much opportunity and value in this. Forget about the operating room, far before somebody gets there, and hopefully they never get there. And we started a company and business for that type of imaging. So we don't compete with or replace an MRI or X-ray. We're a complementary technology, and we scan throughout Florida. We have a unit out in Ohio. We have a unit in New Mexico. And that's a building and growing company around a unique and novel spinal imaging technology. And we're the only company that services non-surgeons. So this technology is founded for surgeons, but we think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for healthcare providers that aren't surgeons to be able to use it, better communicate with their patients, better understand what's going on when their spine is moving. So that's AOMZ Diagnostics.
Can you get specific as to what that diagnostic does that's different from an X-ray or an MRI?
Yeah, I'm happy to go into this. So we measure translation, angulation, and disc height. So primarily to 1/10 of a millimeter. So if somebody goes through forward bend and back bend, which call flexion and extension, each bone or vertebra moves a little bit, and that's what allows us to do this fantastic full range of motion and activities we enjoy as humans. But there are times when things can be moving too little or too much. If things are moving too little, that's often the case when somebody's getting an adjustment, right? Helping facilitate proper motion of a segment in the spine. But when it's moving too much, that's usually a problem with the ligaments. And it's an indication that there could be partial ligament tearing. So when we analyze a spine translation, how those bones are moving across each other, so to speak, angulation, how they're sitting on top of each other, and disc height, how plump those discs are, we're really trying to identify whether there's been partial ligament tearing or issues. And that is a key finding. It's called AOMSI, alteration of motion segment integrity, which is why our company is named AOMZ. And we're analyzing that for 2 primary reasons. One is car accidents in the personal injury space. It's a key finding if somebody's gone through a whiplash injury, and it's not identified in an X-ray or an MRI, because an X-ray is going to be a static image, meaning it's just a picture in time. We're taking video at 8 frames a second throughout a fully controlled range of motion. So about 30% of X-rays, flexion extension X-rays, have false negatives, meaning there are findings that are not picked up between the endpoints. So we pick up all of that data. On an MRI, most people are laying down comfortably, or maybe uncomfortably lying down, but they're lying down nonetheless, so they're not weight-bearing and upright. And about 30%, there's a 30% false negative rate on flexion extension X-rays, and about 30% of people involved in accidents have symptoms in their neck or their low back, but they aren't picked up on an MRI. And that is because an MRI is great when a disc is pressing into the foraminal canal, or a disc is pressing into the space where a nerve is going. But the bones can also move and slide and pinch the nerve. And you're only going to pick up that finding if you are doing a motion analysis, which an MRI and an X-ray is not motion analysis. So that's why we're a complementary technology, not a competitive technology. but we started in the personal injury space exclusively, and now we've expanded. We have out-of-network benefit, out-of-network. We take care of out-of-network people's payers, etc., that might not be involved in as a traumatic injury, but they might have symptoms that are not being seen. They might have symptoms that are unexplained or not seen on an X-ray or an MRI, and there's one extra layer of diagnostics that the doc would want to do. It was founded in the surgical realm when surgeons are making decisions between whether they're going to do a fusion or a decompression, whether they're going to use or not use hardware, is when this was founded to determine the stability of the spine. But the application goes all the way upstream to those who might never have a surgery.
Mm-hmm. And that alteration of motion segment integrity within the context of a whiplash injury is obviously very valuable to the chiropractor who's adjusting the spine, because if there's excessive motion, that can mean that you're delivering an adjustment into something that, the spine has been sprained. And I guess I'm just curious, like, what's your experience as a chiropractor, like, reflecting back, using this technology in your practice, or having experience of seeing how this technology can be beneficial as a chiropractor, clinically speaking? Can you kind of just touch on that and just maybe unpack a little bit about what personal injury chiropractic is? Like, we're trying to introduce people, but we're also trying to give them a little bit more depth as to what this world can look like.
Sure. So personal injury in chiropractic, docs either are super into it or super not into it, and that's just the facts, right? Because when you get involved in a personal injury case, somebody gets involved in a car accident. You can have slip and fall cases, but a majority are car accidents, right? So we probably all, I know I live here in Tampa, Florida. I can't walk 5 feet without seeing a billboard for an advertisement for a personal injury attorney. So the first thing that any chiropractor getting involved in personal injury needs to be aware of is that you're going to be working with attorneys. And as my partner says, it's like you're in a reptile petting zoo. So no offense to attorneys, but you have to be understanding and willing to work with attorneys. And attorneys are about one thing and one thing only, themselves. 99.999% of the time. I'm sure there's one exception out there, but I haven't met him or her yet. So you have to come under the understanding that when you work with the legal realm, it's not at that point only about healthcare. It's about medical legal, as they say, which is a different thing. And for many chiropractors and all healthcare providers, it's a massive turnoff because generally speaking, it's a lot of paperwork. It's not too much fun. And it's like, am I compromising things here? Not that you're doing anything incorrectly, but man, I want to have fun and take care of people that are interested in optimal performance or sports chiropractic, not somebody who, are they telling the truth? Are they not? I guess I got to figure that out, So there's just the black and, that's the truth about personal injury. However, if you do it well, you're serious about it, and you build good relationships with some of the better attorneys in your area, it can be super profitable for you. Personal injury cases tend to pay better than insurance. So you're able to make more money taking care of a segment of the population that really needs your help. They've been involved in an accident, and many of them aren't faking. They are looking to get well. And they shouldn't have to only go to, as we would say, PI mills, personal injury mills, AKA, 3,000 patients in and out of a practice a day, crappy quality of care. Those types of practices exist. It's just the truth. But when we get out there as providers who really care, who don't have the PI mills, so to speak, and we have good attorney relationships, it can be super rewarding and super beneficial from a business sense. So our imaging is impactful for a couple different reasons. I mentioned that attorneys are about attorneys, and attorneys are mostly about making money. The finding of AOMSI, or alteration of motion segment integrity, is a value driver in a case. So typically a personal injury case, when it settles, it is based upon the amount of billed charges that happen on the medical side. This could be like a 4-hour seminar, so I'm not trying to keep it a little brief here, but typically speaking, at the end, so somebody gets injured, they go to see a bunch of different doctors. That bill gets added up at the end of their care. And then let's say that's $10,000 of care they received. They went to the emergency room and they went to see a chiropractor, probably a lot more money than that, but let's say it's 10 grand. That usually means that the attorney is going to say, I want to settle this case for 30,000. So that 10,000 goes to the medical to pay those medical bills. 10,000 goes to the patient or the client in the attorney case, and 10,000 goes to me, the attorney. So usually you take the medical bills times 3, and then it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So that is, and then you end up with reductions and negotiations and all this sort of stuff that we don't need to get into, but that's generally how the system works. So the goal is not to do care that's unnecessary. The goal is not to try to find things that aren't there to showcase figment injuries, but it is really important to what they would say would be objectively demonstrate proof of injury. And when we objectively demonstrate proof of injury, that helps make the attorneys' lives easier because there's less fighting. That makes the settlements easier, which means that the patient ultimately gets the care they want and deserve and need to be made whole. That's what we care about as physicians, as chiropractors, and that is where our imaging can help out. In those cases where a patient has minimal findings on an MRI and the doctor is saying, I don't know what to do with this patient, the attorney is saying, come on, dude, figure something out. And the patient saying, I'm in pain. That's a tough position to be in. And it shouldn't be the case, but it is. So this is where our imaging can come in super helpful and handy, because it can showcase the injuries that are not showcased on an X-ray or an MRI, that can help the patient get the care they desire, make the attorneys happy because there's actually a bill going out and care being delivered. And it can help the doctor, the chiropractor, better understand exactly what's going on. Now, in terms of the specifics of what you described, when we look at alteration of motion segment integrity and its findings, in the case where there is excessive motion, more than 5 millimeters of motion, that generally goes to surgical instability, meaning that patient does need a surgery very quickly because their head's going to fall off, not literally, but figuratively speaking, on the inside, their bones are moving around way too much, and it could cause a spinal cord injury. So we've done well over 1,000 scans, and we've seen that less than 5 times. So it's very rare. So it's not. You shouldn't just be scared of that, but there usually be significant other clinical signs and symptoms before the imaging that would clue you into that. But many times we see that they're beyond normal limits. So they don't need surgery, but it's beyond normal limits. And that gap is called an injury. So, at that point, that's where the care we deliver as chiropractors can be super important. So in this surgical instability, you're never going to adjust that area. They need to be referred out because they could have a spinal cord injury. But in the middle, it's very important when we're delivering the hands-on care that we do as chiropractors, because when the body heals, specifically ligaments, they take 6 to 12 months to heal in completion, and they heal with a lot of scar tissue. You think about like an ACL tear. If anybody out there has had an ACL tear and you've had surgery on your knee, pretty much the day that you have that surgery or a knee replacement or something, you're moving that knee the day that you have that surgery. Why? Because if you wait 2 or 3 days, your range of motion is going to be terrible. It's like stiff, it hurts, scar tissue sets in. You got to get that moving ASAP. The same thing holds true with the ligaments that support our spine. However, it's been way under talked about. And that is when somebody gets in an accident and we see that there might be excessive motion, not surgical excessive, but excessive, their body is already healing. That you weren't there at the accident. That accident happened a day ago, 2 days ago, a week ago. Their body is healing with scar tissue. And your goal is to minimize scar tissue, because scar tissue takes up more space in the body. Space is at a premium, so it could impact them later on. It also is less flexible and pliable and dynamic, so it can lead to advanced degenerative changes earlier on. It can cause a whole host of issues. So the care that we deliver, whether segmentally at the spine, regionally in the whole neck or low back, or whole body exercise, critically important to facilitate the healing process, minimize scar tissue. Patient's going to have a better outcome. And our imaging technology helps identify those areas very cleanly, clearly, and directly in a way that others don't. So that was a little long, but yeah, that was the details.
I appreciate it. And now let's transition into the smart chiropractor. Can you kind of just touch on the gift that you guys have put together, you and Dr. Jason Deitch?
I'd be
I don't know
happy
if I'm saying
to.
his name right. I think I am.
You did a great job. It's a great job. Yeah. But Jason Deitch and myself met 5 or 6 years ago, and we saw a huge need. He saw what I was doing with the evidence-based chiropractor, which predominantly helps chiropractors build relationships with other healthcare providers. And Jason was like, man, what about everybody else on planet Earth? What about so we call that B2B, right? Evidence-based chiropractors, business to business. One doctor talking to another doctor, building referral network. The other side of the coin is B2C, business to consumer. A lot bigger pie. So Jason thoughtfully was like, man, this makes a lot of sense what you're up to, but like, why don't you help chiropractors communicate this kind of stuff to regular people? And it was like, yes, we should do that. So Jason and I, over the last half decade, built the Smart Chiropractor into, we have a podcast, a blog, a YouTube channel, an email list, every way possible. But the product is that we found that chiropractors were having difficulty really getting out there and consistently communicating. We call that, our philosophy is teach and invite consistently. If you are teaching, showcasing something engaging, educational, inspirational, and you are inviting the call to action, and you're doing that consistently, you're going to build a big audience, you're going to build a nice practice. But the last word, the consistency portion, is super hard for so many people, right? It's like, so teach and invite consistently. That's like a core tenet, I think all of us as doctors, teachers, educators should hold true. But it's super hard to stay consistent. So Jason and I thought about things. We said, well, let's create a program and a system that supports doctors. Some of our doctors use all of our tools to do all their teaching and inviting. Some of our docs are content creators, and they use us to fill in the gaps between the content that they create because they can't do it 24/7 because they're taking care of patients, So we think about our content in terms of monthly campaigns, weekly topics, and daily posts. And we create that content for our doctors. And then we publish that content and automate it for them. So across social is one channel, and that would be Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We publish content for our doctors across those channels, a Google Business as well. Email. So we have a complete Chiro emails marketing system that provides weekly emails, quarterly reactivation emails, a whole bunch of automated and segmented email system so that you can consistently communicate with your patients for reactivations, better retention. And then in-office education. So handouts, streaming video to the reception area. And the key is that all three of those things, the social content, the email content, and the in-office, they all are of the same ilk. So they're all the same monthly campaign, weekly topic, and daily post. So no matter where anybody in your health tribe is engaging with you, it doesn't look like a haberdashery of 75 different things, but there's a unified message going out so you are consistently able to teach and invite. We also create blogs, video scripts for our docs, done for them videos, pretty much any piece of content that they could need or want. And we are super fortunate to have a remote team of 12 full-time awesome people that do copywriting for us, design, development, project management spread throughout the country. And we all work full-time for hundreds of chiropractors. And I would say I'm super proud to say, looking at our stats last year, we had over 52 million impressions on social. We send about 600,000 emails per month for our doctors. And we reached over 5 million individual people with our content through our members last year. So and it's about 85% US based, although we have docs that utilize us in Hong Kong, Europe, Australia, etc. Most of it's US based. So I'll say over 1% of the entire United States population saw some form of content by a Smart Chiropractor member over the last 12 months. And I think we just feel like we're just getting started.
And I appreciate you sharing all that, because I think that what it does for the prospective student or even the current student is it shows all the different areas of communication that you could start to build now while you're in school. If you're in a class, take the information that you're learning and try and figure out a way that you can translate this information to a future practice blog post, or even creating the content as you're going through. I think that is super valuable, just to leverage and make the experience in chiropractic school more valuable. It's such a big investment. It's so much time that you have to create all the different things that you're immersed in, that you're learning about, that you're surrounded by. And I think that hearing you share all the things that you're doing for chiropractors helps them see, okay, these are things that I'm going to need help with. Why don't I just take the time that I have right now, that I'm already focused on this topic, I'm in nutrition class, or I'm in, whatever class you're in. It just find a way to connect that class to a future piece of content, or even create the content now. So like you said, when you graduate, you already have an audience. So anyway, I thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you diving in and sharing all these details with the students, because I think that it's going to be valuable if we're able to really get this to students early and often in their path, that it makes a better profession in the future.
No doubt about it. Can I say one thing before we close? So, thank you for doing this and getting out there. Certainly, I'm happy you asked me to come on, but this is awesome. I understand how hard and difficult it is to show up, to interview, to do the outreach necessary, and to publish. And you're doing something super, super valuable, super awesome. And everybody listening and watching, you are fortunate, to be able to have somebody like you getting out there and doing this. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I'll close with one additional tip, and that is, as a student, as a pre-Chiro student or a Chiro student, follow other students that have a little bit bigger audiences than you have. Follow what they're up to, see what they're doing. Those are great areas to model. And also, if you are interested in anything that we discussed, if you check out the blog on the Smart Chiropractor, we break down every bit of how we produce content in every way across every channel. So there are a ton of great resources out there, but we show you behind every single thing of how we produce and create everything. So if you have more time than money right now and you're motivated to be a content creator, do it. Get out there, as you just suggested. Get out there. Take that little bit of extra time. It's a skill. Don't get bummed out if you don't. Everybody starts at zero. We interviewed chiropractors all the time, and it takes time. You're not going to put out one post and all of a sudden have 1 million followers. But when you show up and teach and invite consistently, and you keep listening to podcast videos like this showcasing creators in the community, follow them, see what they're up to, take some action today. My final saying today will be, we always say results follow action. So the actions that you take today will give you the results that you desire tomorrow, but you have to start with the action. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you so much for having me and creating such an awesome resource for so many people out there. It's really cool.
No doubt. And then just in the last minute or two, I'm curious what you think is possible if we're able to position chiropractic in the view, in the face of the high school, the college students that are going towards life sciences, health sciences, biology. I don't know if you're familiar how they changed the entrance requirements, but now you just need a bachelor's degree in anything. Could be art history, but that qualifies you to go to chiropractic school. So that presents new challenges, but it also presents new opportunities. So I'm just curious what you think is possible if we could say attract an extra 25,000 people in the next 5 years. You just mentioned there's 50,000 active chiropractors practicing. What if we could 10x that amount just by the recognition that right now there's 1.2 million hashtag pre-med, 1 million hashtag pre-PT, and only 200 hashtag pre-Chiro. Like, that's a huge gap.
There's no question about that. It's a multifactorial answer, as you sort of alluded to. There's a lot of factors at play. The market does matter, but certainly that trickles down to gaining interest early on with people that are in the decision-making process, right? So there's a little bit of a chicken and egg, right? Which comes first? A lot of student influx or a really strong profession, and it takes two to tango is the answer always, right? So it's a little bit of both. But in my belief, certainly, as we continue as providers, those that are already graduated, as we continue to get out there, have conversations, showcase who we are and what we do, that only helps strengthen the next generation of to be chiropractors. And I think that is some of the most important aspects of things humanly possible. I speak about this a little bit when we talk about other building relationships with other healthcare providers. And there's a really strong correlative here. I bring up to docs all the time, I say, think about how untrained and poorly a typical primary care doctor takes care of neuromusculoskeletal issues. They just don't know. It's not that they don't like their patients. They just don't know what to do. So they rely on what they know. I said, and think about the fact that they know so much more about that care, and they're prescribing medications and all these things that don't work. They know 100 if that's on a scale of 100, 0 to 100, they know 100 there. Think about, they know 3 about chiropractic. So they're making poor decisions about neuromusculoskeletal care, and they know 100x more about neuromusculoskeletal care than they do about chiropractic. So that emphasizes the exact point as you described, where it's like people have no idea. So the more that we can get out there and showcase who we are and what we do, and there's a lot of complainers out there about how chiropractors utilize, whether it be TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, whatever else. I just think that's BS. The more that we can now, we're always going to have the bell-shaped curve. You're going to love some, no matter what. Nobody's you, so or me or anybody else, right? So it's like you're always going to love some content creators, loathe some content creators, and most people fall in the middle. And the same will be true with chiropractic. But showing behind the four walls of the practice and being able to showcase this is what happens in a chiropractic practice, I think is always a good thing, because more people get to understand it. I was speaking with my soon to be 16-year-old, 15-year-old niece 2 days ago in Jacksonville. We're in a car and she's like, do you follow any YouTube chiropractic? And she's like asking me about YouTube like she has zero interest in healthcare. She has like, 5 years ago, it dramatically changed. She's aware now that chiropractic exists. She watched chiropractic videos. Yes, they are like crunch and crack videos. They're probably not my idea of like what's the best chiropractic content you can put out. But you know what? There's also plenty of movies that I don't think are the best movies that do really well, and some movies I love that that nobody else likes. So when you get out there and tell the most important thing, in my opinion, to distill this down cleanly and clearly, would be the most important thing you can do when utilizing content creation, utilizing social media, publishing videos or blog posts, is all of it is an opportunity to teach and invite, and all of it is an opportunity to showcase who you are and showcase how that ties into your community. So when you're producing content, it needs to be two-sided. One is that it should be all about the viewer, not about you, but it's always a platform to showcase how you can help them, and there is a you there. So it is important to showcase what is your practice about, what are you passionate about, and then always tying that to the benefit that somebody can expect. And the benefit doesn't always have to be come into my office and receive the adjustment. If you're a pre-chiro student, it could be follow to live a healthier life. Here's what I'm learning. Here's what I agree with. Here's what I question or disagree with. Those are fantastic topics for a student to tackle and showcase the journey that they have. And it's like a skill. It's only going to help you be that much better when you're getting out there and ready to graduate. And I think that's one of the most important things we can all take away.